Now let us see, will every graph represent a function? Because every relation is not a function. Then will every graphical representation, do it represent a function? If a line parallel to y-axis, very important observation, if a line parallel to y-axis cuts the graph of the function in at most one point, then it represents a function. Now let us see this from a geometry perspective. Now I am taking one graph. This graph represents some relation. I have to establish whether this is a function or not. So what this condition says, a line drawn parallel to y-axis. See, I have drawn a line which is parallel to y-axis. Now what do we observe? There are 2 points where the graph is cutting. One is at this point and one is at this point. At 2 points, this graph was cut by the line which I have drawn parallel to that of y-axis. Now what happens here? If suppose I say this is a point some a comma 0 on x-axis, then this would be a comma f of a, and this would be a comma some minus f of a. Now if you look at this, a is an element in the domain which is on x-axis. It is mapped to f of a and minus f of a. So a, which is in the first set, is mapped to two different elements in the second set. Then can I call this relation as a function? No, right? So that's why if a line parallel to y-axis, if it cuts the graph and cuts in at most one point, then only the graph represents a function, right? Now let us see another example. Now here you consider any line which is parallel to y-axis, any line. How many points it will cut? That's a line I have drawn which is parallel to the y-axis. It cuts only at 1 point. Now this line is cutting at only 1 point. That means every element on the x-axis will have only one image on y-axis by this graph. So can I call this a function? Yes, this is a function, right? Now, just for practice, does this graph represent a function? Let us see. What are we supposed to do? We are expected to draw a line which is parallel to y-axis. Yes, I have drawn. How many points are coming on the graph which are intersecting? This line which I have drawn parallel to x-axis is cutting in more than 1 point. So what is happening? For different values on the x-axis, I have this element is mapped. I have this point is also mapped. I have this point is also mapped to the same element which is on the corresponding x-axis. That is on the first set. Then can I call this as a function? No, this is not a function. Now, is this graph represents a function? Let us draw a line which is parallel to y-axis anywhere. Now, how many points are there? Only one point of intersection with the given graph. So, corresponding to each element on the first set, there is only one element in the second set which is mapped. So, can I call this as a function? Yes, this also represents a function. Now, what do you expect? The third graph, is that representing a function? If I draw a line which is parallel to y-axis, then it will have 2 points of intersections. So is this a function? This is not a function because corresponding to this number on the first set, there are 2 mapped elements in the second set. Therefore, the element in first set is repeated in the mapping. So this does not represent a function.